This year, the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce honored Dr. Donna Lynne with its highest distinction, the Legacy Award, part of the 2025 Top 25 Most Powerful Women in Business. The award recognizes women whose lifetime contributions have left a lasting impact on Colorado's business community and opened pathways for future generations. As Simone D. Ross, CEO of the Chamber, explained, Dr. Lynne has used every platform she's had to drive better outcomes for Coloradans, especially women, families, and underserved communities. Her servant leadership and transformational change have been instrumental in shaping a stronger, more inclusive future for our state. From New York City government during some of its most turbulent years, to leading in healthcare through times of crisis, to serving as Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, Donna Lynne's career has been defined by resilience, service, and an unwavering commitment to community. PBS 12's Frannie Matthews sat down with Denver Health CEO Donna Lynne to hear about the fiscal emergencies, public health challenges, and shifting political landscapes she's worked through. She talked with us about the lessons she's learned along the way and the values that continue to drive her leadership.
Donna, you're being recognized for an amazing career in leadership. You've had varying experiences and you've had lots of different sectors that you've worked in.
I've always been motivated when I think about the work that I've done by a quote from Marian Wright Edelman, which is, "Service is the rent that we pay." And I really believe that, and I've always been motivated by trying to do for others who may not have, whether they're underprivileged, underrepresented. That's been my primary motivation.
You spent the first 20 years in the New York City government. That means was it 3 different administrations?
It was actually 4 administrations in New York City government, so 4 different mayors. And from 1976 into the early 90s. When I first entered service in New York, the city was literally bankrupt. The city went to the federal government and said, "We need help." And they were told, "Figure it out yourself." And so we began a pretty challenging process of, unfortunately, cutting our expenses, which meant laying off employees, borrowing money from pension funds, doing some innovative things that would put the city back on a fiscal stability platform. And boy, I learned a lot in that time. And then ultimately found healthcare as a passion because those employees and their dependents needed the basic healthcare benefits, and they cost a lot of money even back then.
Those early days were when the AIDS epidemic was breaking out, and that was a very big issue in New York City.
Actually, during that time, I worked for the public hospital system in New York, and we were focused on not only treating those patients, but also dealing with a spike in crime in New York. That meant unfortunate circumstances for many people, but for the hospital and the healthcare system, people coming in with gunshot wounds and other difficult conditions was definitely eye-opening to me, but seeing some of the impact that the healthcare system was experiencing, including the employees, definitely motivated me to think much more broadly about how do you lead in a difficult environment where employees are challenged by the things that they have to face.
Yeah. You've also drawn a comparison to nature and the shifting landscape to what it looks like to be a leader. You went to base camp, right? On Everest?
I did go to base camp in Everest, and I've climbed a lot of mountains here in Colorado and internationally, which, again, it's one of those things, if you had told my 22-year-old self or even my 32-year-old self that I would be doing these things, I would have said, "You're crazy." But I've used the shifting landscape in climbing, from changes in heat, changes in conditions that sometimes make the climb more difficult, to focus on being resilient in those instances, because it's always easy to turn around and it's always easy to quit. I'm not a quitter, and so persevering through that kind of adversity is really important to me, because I do want the ultimate prize, which in climbing is the peak.
So how do you take care of yourself so that you can be resilient?
Well, I'm not so sure I take care of myself, but I do get a lot of enjoyment about working. And sometimes people, including my children, will say, "Why are you still working, Mom?" And I say, because not only do I feel responsible for the people that work for me, but I feel actually motivated by them, because they are dealing, particularly in healthcare, with that. The work at the front line can be exhausting. It can be rewarding, but it can also be very challenging. I am so honored to work alongside the people at Denver Health who are dealing with our 280,000 patients every single day. And that is a tough job. I always say a good day is when I am walking out of this office and into one of our clinics or into the hospital or into other environments and hearing from them, but also trying to be authentic myself when there are problems or issues that we're going to have to confront.
Trust is probably the cornerstone of really building a healthy culture.
We have an aspiration to be the most trusted healthcare provider in Colorado. That's not a small task, and trust has to be earned with your employees, with your patients, and with the community. I did encounter a couple of situations where a particular community said, "I'm going to go through some of the things we think you did wrong." And so when I listened to the members of that community, it wasn't about arguing. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good debater. It was really about listening and then reflecting on how could I have done it better, or how could the organization have done it better. So I think that's a really important skill. I believe in the institutions I work for. I want to defend them, but there's lots of different viewpoints about how things should be managed, and so I think listening is really important.
I really liked your comments about listening to other people, and I think that's a good lesson for all of us right now in this time of polarization, that people have different points of view, and if you're just talking in an echo chamber, you're not learning much.
Where I think I struggle, and I think many of us struggle, is healthcare is life and death. It isn't about, should a sign read a certain way, or should we have a tariff or not, but to the extent that there are huge differences in how people think about healthcare. I mean, we're talking about lives, and so I take that very seriously, and so that might be the time when maybe I'm not going to listen as much and I'm going to fight. I'm putting on my fighting clothes. Particularly in the environment we're in right now, I mean, both here at Denver Health being an important safety net for the city and actually for the state, being faced with a lot of challenges, whether they're from the federal government, the state, or the city. And I've been fortunate because having worked in all three sectors, I actually worked for the federal government when I was a youngster. And so I've worked for the federal government, the state government, and city government. And it gives me an appreciation for the work that they do and the difficulty, but also the way to communicate with them, the way to compromise, the way to problem solve. And I think that's really important for anybody who's in business. And there's often not that understanding.
A quote that I like of Donna's, which is very stoic. We can neither ignore nor react to every obstacle. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, as I said, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the things that are being thrown at you, change, or as a leader, it's natural that your people move on to other jobs. And I had this one circumstance where somebody that I had cultivated and was just so proud of and so important to the team, one day said, "I'm going to leave." And my initial reaction was, "You can't do that to me." And then I pulled back and said, wait, part of my job as a leader is to develop other leaders. And the fact that this person is going to go on to a much bigger job and bigger opportunity, I had to say don't treat that as it's just happening to you, Donna. Treat it as part of your leadership role is to create opportunity for people.
If I look at your resume, what I see is that you execute against a plan, you understand operationalizing, you understand the details. And I think that may be your superpower, to have that big picture thinking and then be able to make it a reality. Does that ever tug on back and forth with you, or does it just fit really neatly?
No, I think I got to a place, I've always worked in very large workplaces. With one exception, I ran a nonprofit with 8 employees for 2 years. I think it was the hardest job I ever had.
I agree with you.
So but I've mostly come from huge, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands kind of organizations. And it is a struggle to think, my job is to set strategy. My job is to be financially responsible, maybe to report to a board. We have several boards here at Denver Health, for example. My job is to motivate. At the same time, I can't be casual about details because I'm putting myself out publicly to affirm whatever it is that I'm recommending. Let's say let's build a new building in such and such location. Well, I need to understand how much does it cost? What are the financial risks? What are the opportunities? And so, quite frankly, I succeed by having that sort of big picture focus, but the willingness to ask a lot of difficult questions. I don't need to get my hands into everything. I have a great team, and I've always had great teams and felt like my responsibility is building those teams. Integrity is a huge factor in the work that I do and the work that I've done, because there's so much intersection with the public. And I often think, is what I'm doing or what we are doing as an organization, could it be a newspaper headline? And what would be the fallout if what we did was a newspaper headline? And that becomes a little bit of a North Star that, there's lots of people who have been brought down by silly things. They accepted tickets to the Super Bowl, or maybe they cut corners. And those, the other expression, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and one incident to destroy it. And believe me, that's always in my head. So integrity of the organization and integrity of the leaders is a critical part of what I believe in.
So Donna, I want to ask you about a specific instance at Denver Health. Lots of financial obstacles and concerns, and a ballot issue went out, 2Q, and because of our Tabor law, it needs to go to the voters, and it passed. Tell me about that journey, because you had to do a lot of work to make sure everybody understood how important this is.
No, thanks. And 2Q, thanks to the voters in Denver, has created some financial stability for Denver Health, and that's really important, particularly where we might be headed in the future. The first thing that I did when I came here one of the first things was to talk to other executives in my position around the country. And the more I talked to them from Dallas, Houston, Indianapolis, and other large cities where an urban safety net is important, the more I learned that their city or their county supported them in ways that our city wasn't supporting Denver Health. There's a lot of history to that, and knowing that the city itself had limited resources, I started thinking, well, what else could I do? And part of that was building a community of important people, former elected officials, current elected officials, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and actually posing the problem to them. I kind of knew what the answer was, but I said, first of all, we spent time telling them the breadth of what we do, but let them work on possible solutions. And so I had a wonderful group of about 30 community leaders who helped us problem solve and get us to the point where we could make a recommendation, we could go to the city council, we could get something on the ballot, and then ultimately run a campaign. And that process took a full year. And I think what helped us pass the measure was the engagement of the community leaders, the endorsement of key community leaders, and a process where I didn't just say, I know the answer, this is what we're going to do. I listened, I learned from them, and then we turned it into a proposal.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Again, that was Donna Lynne, the current CEO of Denver Health, which is Colorado's largest safety net hospital. Our thanks again to Dr. Lynne for sharing her story.